Welcome to the Elevating La Cultura podcast, a space where I talk with Latinas who are passionate about what they do and are willing to share that passion with others to change the narrative, especially for the next generation. Each season is centered around different topics, but all with the Latina perspective. Welcome to season 11, where I'm talking all things finance. I'm so excited to share these powerful conversations. So vámonos, and let's get into it. Monica Acosta is a back-of-the-yards native and proud Chicagoan. She went to Whitney Young High School and attended Roosevelt University, where she studied finance and economics. During college, she obtained an internship through Inroads, which paved the way for her career with the federal government. She is currently a bank examiner with the OCC, an agency under the U.S. Treasury Department. Monica lives in Humboldt Park with her husband and their pet dog, Lola. Please enjoy our conversation. Hey, I am really thankful that I get to talk with Monica today. We connected recently at an event. I've known you for a while through networking events through actually Veronica, and she was a guest like on my first season, but we do a lot of networking events together, and you are her sister, and I am just really thankful that we get to chat today. We were at an event recently, and you were talking about your job and your thoughts, and I was just like, okay, let's continue this conversation on the podcast because I think this is going to be super valuable. So why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself?
Sure. And so I want to preface this by, just being very thankful that you have me here. As you mentioned, Veronica is my older sister, so I really look up to her. And she's always spoken very highly of you and everything that you're doing. So when we had the chance to speak a little bit more at the recent event, I was very honored that you invited me to come here and speak about myself. So I was born and raised in Chicago. Veronica is my older sister, but we have a pretty big family. It's seven kids in total, and it's blended. It's a long story about that, but ultimately, I grew up on the South Side, and of my siblings, I uh, went a little bit on a different path. Vero is very creative, and she's taken my headshots. She makes beautiful art, but I've always been a little bit different in that I'm much more pragmatic, much more numbers focused. So for me, naturally, my path took me more kind of like on a finance and business route in school. But as far as my career, I actually fell into it by chance. I went to university at Roosevelt. It's actually a local one here downtown. And I got the internship at my agency first. And once I learned more about what they did, I asked them, okay, what degree do I need to uh, get a career here as an examiner? And they said accounting or finance. I tried accounting. I did not like it. And so I got my degree in finance. And long story short, I've been here for my entire professional career, almost 10 years now. So I have been very proud over all the things that I've been able to accomplish up to this point. It's gotten a lot of support from multiple different role models along the way. And I think that's why it's so important that you're doing something like this, because obviously I don't necessarily consider myself a role model, but I think representation does matter. And as many voices as we can get out about different avenues that people can take in life, I think it does open a lot of opportunities and opens people's minds to new experiences.
That's so interesting that you say that you got your internship first, because usually people go to school and then look for an internship. How did that happen for you? Like, how did you make the connections to get an internship?
It's a good question. So it was my freshman year, I think. At the time, my parents had either were in the process of moving to Mexico, and I basically decided I need to figure out what I'm gonna do for my career. Like I need to get a decent job to be able to support myself, right? And I actually reached out to a second cousin, I think, and I knew she got a she went to DePaul and she had a successful career by that point. And so I asked her, like, hey, while you were in school, how did you make that work for you, right? And so she recommended this organization called Inroads. And so through Inroads, I was a sophomore, I believe, at the time. And so technically still undecided, but still, I believe, um, I'm forgetting the timing because this is like 10 years ago now. But I believe that I was either in the College of Business or I was kind of like getting my prerequisites basically figured out. And when I was at the point where I needed to kind of make the decision, um, I went through Inroads and ultimately got my internship. At that point, when I had to start taking classes for my major, I made that decision. I went first accounting, and then I switched to finance, but the course load was pretty similar. I think it was just a number of classes to kind of complete the degree at my either junior or senior class level. So it wasn't that much of a pivot. And by that point, I think I had taken some AP classes that kind of helped with not extending my time at university. So that's kind of how it happened. So I fell into it in a sense.
Interesting. Usually when we hear people going to school to pursue like business or a career in finance, like accounting is the one that I hear the most. And so when you said that you had pursued or had started your path to in learning about accounting or getting a degree in accounting, but then switched over to finance, I'm curious to know what the difference is between the two.
Mhm. So it's a great question. So I like well, the way my brain worked, I struggled a lot with like accounting has a lot of rules and there's not a lot of it's just like okay this is this way just because it is, right? That's because just what the standards are, right? Whereas like with finance, there was a lot from my perspective, like the way I process information, the way I think is that I want to know why. Like why is it this way? And once I'm able to kind of rationalize and think through that process, it sticks in my brain. So for accounting, it was very difficult for me to just memorize just for the sake of memorization. Whereas for finance, I could understand okay, this is what's actually happening. This is why it's happening. And economics also, I think I had a double major in economics. I have to look at my degrees. So that's where we're going. I don't really didn't need it for my job anyway, but in the sense of like everything I learned through my internship, through school, didn't necessarily relate to what I was going to be doing full time. Like obviously I needed that foundational knowledge of like economics and finance and those concepts, but it wasn't like um what I was learning in school was helping me um like do my job better in that sense because it's essentially on the job training. So I got my degree. I basically was taking my classes and I enjoyed them very much. And for me, it's like if I like something, I learn much more meaningfully, things stick better, and it made it more manageable, I guess, for me to complete my degree. So that's why for me it was important. Like, listen, I have to get my bachelor's to get this job full time to be able to transition. I might as well study or go through a course of study that I enjoy, so that I can, get my bachelor's and then start full time. Because whether it's accounting or finance, I'm still going to be doing the same thing. Um, you can also have an economics degree. But when it comes to examining, I think the important traits that make a good examiner are analytical skills, research skills, and I think being an ongoing learner, because to this day, there's things that I'm still learning on the job. It's almost impossible to have a understanding of all of the different things that make banking supervision. Because nobody's just a computer, right? Everybody's human. And there may be specialists that have a very wide breadth of expertise in a particular area. But if you're a generalist, you just need to know the foundations of, risk management and just safety and soundness standards. And you can pretty much either know where to look to research things further and broaden your understanding in a particular thing that you may be encountering, or know where to who to lean on to make an appropriate decision, if that makes sense.
I'm interested to know how your career path since graduating, so the transition between internship to full time, how has that developed over the past 10 years? Because you said you've been with this company for a long time. And so, for those who are listening and on this journey themselves or thinking about being on this journey, how has that looked like for you over the past 10 years?
So for the agency, essentially they had at the time a financial intern program. And what that is that it varies by office. I think in the previous years they had tried to kind of standardize it across the country because we are an agency under the federal government and we have a nationwide presence. Every office has a different way they like to approach things. Where I started, essentially, I was um, following along new hires. And so what that means is that I was basically doing the same work that someone who would be starting fresh out of college as an intern. And so that was a very valuable experience to me because I was doing the work. So I had a preview to understand if I were to come here full time, what I would be doing. Like it wasn't babied, if that makes any sense. Like it was the actual work I would be doing. And I'll be honest, it was very challenging. But it was a challenge that was very rewarding. I really appreciated that I was treated like an adult. My contributions were pulled together to support like an actual report. And I think working with the team, having my perspective respected, even though I was still learning in that process, was something that really made me feel that I was valued. And that's why as I was going through school and working with an amazing team and everybody that I encountered at the agency, you hear a very negative stereotype sometimes. Even I had these preconceived notions going into the agency, government work, like, oh, you just write negative, like, oh, people don't really care or, lazy or whatever. But every person that I encountered, for the vast majority of them, incredibly hardworking, believed in the mission, and honestly, that was what really appealed to me the most, is that I was working towards um, the agency's mission in a safe and sound banking system, that I was protecting consumers from harm. And I wasn't, not that there's anything wrong with it, but that I was working for the American public versus like a shareholders, right? And so that cemented my desire to keep coming back. I worked through a summer and then I asked if I could come back and work in the fall and the spring, and they accommodated me. They were incredibly open to me, like wanting to learn. So if I wanted to participate, hey, you have anything in the district office, which is a little bit different from at the time from what I was doing. It was basically going to banks and um, reviewing um, reviewing their processes and making conclusions, right? But during the fall, they had me look at a different side of the agency, which was kind of just a processing on the back end, right? And so I was able to get a wide perspective of this is where I could start my career and this is where I could potentially go. And so everything that I've learned up to that point just made me feel that, you know what? I don't really think it's worth looking elsewhere. Like I'm very happy here with all my supervisors, with my colleagues, and I want to stay here. And starting full time, it was January 2018 when I did. I was able to really quickly accelerate through my career because I was given more complex assignments earlier than if I would have started as like a new entry. And I'm 29 years old. I've been able to supervise mega institutions, which is like trillions in assets. I've been able to be part of, fraud investigations, a high level of complexity, working with teams across the country. And so I'm incredibly thankful to all the opportunities that I was afforded. Um, but it is a great agency to be in, and I'm always going to be proud of the work that I've done here. I have, on occasion, been offered opportunities outside of the agency, from people that I've left, or just basically friends that I've made along the way. And I have been offered more pay, but ultimately made the decision to stay. Largely because I really do find the work that I do here very rewarding.
And I think that's one thing that really interested me when we were chatting. And the fact that you said that you are so passionate about your job. And it was just like we were talking about something, and you're like, I love this job. I'm going to stay here for as long as I can. And I just thought that that was so admirable, and also not something that you hear very often in the corporate space. Um, I'm interested because you said that you are a government employee, that you work for a government agency. And lately we've been hearing a lot of talk about federal and government jobs and the insecurity that people are facing, like not knowing if they will have a job, not knowing if their department's going to be cut. And so, if you wouldn't mind sharing, like, how has that experience been for you? How are you managing? How are you just going about the day to day?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. And I'll preface this by saying that these views are my own, as a disclosure, not of the agency as a whole, um, and just myself as an individual. I will say that, one of the things that, independent, and this is a very apolitical statement, independent of the administration and whatever goes on, um, federal employees to provide very critical services to all Americans. And obviously, I work within the banking space, right? And so if you think about, I'll use myself anecdotally, right? Um, I got a loan, when I was very young, to get a car so that I could get a job, to get this job, right? Um, and my access to that credit basically allowed me to go and open up a lot of possibilities career wise, from people, buying homes if they're the first in generation to be able to buy a home, if they need to have a credit card for emergency expenses or whatever that may be, access to credit, being treated fairly by financial institutions, which have, a very long history across, even outside of this country, just across the world. um, they weren't always fair, right? So making sure that we establish a safe and sound banking system and that people have confidence in the fairness of it, that is incredibly critical. But that's just one part of the things that federal employees do, right? If you think about any industry related to food safety, air travel, almost every single aspect of, how we live as Americans has some sort of, at some point, been touched by an American federal employee. And all of these people, like I said, every single one of us, we're in federal government because we care about what we do. I won't speak for everybody, um, but if you do consider that, yes, I could be making more in the private sector. Um, there used to be, and one of the things that was kind of a big selling point for federal service was job security. And that is obviously into question now. And I can't speak for anybody else and for whatever the goals are of this administration, or independently of whatever ideas other people have politically or whatever. But from my perspective, yes, there's a lot of instability. I won't lie that, I was scared initially. Um, I was frustrated, disheartened, especially seeing a lot of negative things on the media, because I did take it personally. It was kind of hard for me not to take it personally when I work so hard. And you hear all these negative things, but one of the things that I decided is that, no matter what, I will continue to do my job faithfully. I will continue to work hard as long as I'm here, because that is the oath that I made when I started this job. Um, and yeah, I mean, I will stay here because I know that what I do brings value. And wherever that may be, maybe I'll still be here. Maybe not. Maybe I'll have to find myself making a career change. But no matter what happens, I will always be proud of the work that I've done at the agency.
That is so admirable and encouraging. I feel like a lot of, like you said, a lot of things that we hear in the media are could be negative, and I just I think I was drawn to your story because of how positively you were talking about your career, your position, your desire, your passion for serving the American people. And yeah, I just love that. I think that we need more stories like this. We need more hope, more encouragement, more, yeah, just more joy, positivity amidst the uncertainties that we're facing.
Yeah, and I mean, I think the other thing I'll say is that it is hard to kind of get bogged down in a lot of negativity, right? Especially right now. But one of the things that has been a silver lining, sometimes I've had to be the shoulder or somebody holding up somebody else. Sometimes other people have had to help hold me up. And it changes by the hour, as you can imagine, right? Um, but the seeing people care, I think that is what gives me a lot of hope, right? Sometimes it can feel like you're shouting into the void and like why isn't anybody listening? Why don't people care? But when you see other people who actively show that they care about others, that they care about their jobs, that in itself is very encouraging. And then it shows me no matter what happens, um, throughout history, we have seen people who have been brave, who have shown that they care about their people, care about the work that they do. And that in itself is encouraging to me. And it has helped me feel empowered that I may be one person and then I may not have a lot of influence or financial ability or even resources to make um, a widespread message. But even still, I have within my power to do what I can within my level of control, right? And so one of the things that I was very proud of within my agency was being part of employee network groups, recruiting, raising awareness. And when that was, when they got rid of it, and a lot of industries are kind of rolling back those DEI initiatives, it did break my heart, honestly, because all I wanted to do was help people. And it was a lot of effort. And it was a lot of us that really were hurt by that. But it doesn't mean it has to be the end, right? Sometimes, like, the initial grief is hard to bear, but that doesn't mean that you have to stop, right? And by that, I mean, maybe I can't do it within work, but I can outreach or be active outside of work and put my energy elsewhere and still do the things that bring me joy. So if that involves like volunteering, I volunteer in the Economic Awareness Council, wonderful organization. And that's just one of the things I do. I used to volunteer or I used to be a dancer at Ballet Folklorico de Chicago, led by Ofelia Guerra, who would be great for this show. Um, and she is someone that cares very much about her community and within dancing and just kind of raising awareness. I had to leave just because of with my job and having to travel a lot, I just could not commit to the time needed for it. But knowing that there's people out there that will still be there, will still care, will still work hard, and I can give just a little bit of support um, is very comforting to me and is a good way for me to kind of express that um, desire, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I think that is really encouraging. And like, I think we all need to hear it because we can, like you said, get bogged down in all of the negativity and the stress and the anxiety because it's coming at us at all angles. And it's so important to find that community piece and the joy in the day to day. So yeah, I really appreciate you sharing that. Um, I know we've been talking about the challenging times that we're in, But along the way, have you experienced anything that you've had to overcome, whether that's mentally um, through your education, through your job, that you didn't necessarily think was going to be a challenging experience?
I think most of it was challenging, honestly. um, well, first of all, finishing my degree was very hard because at the time my parents were in Mexico. Um, I was, living with my little brother who was still in high school. I was working pretty much full time. At one point, I had three jobs: one full time, one part time, and like a gig job. So I had a day off every 2 weeks, coincidentally around the time I met my husband. So had a very challenging start to my 20s. Reflecting over that kind of trajectory, work wise, I would say confidence in presentation skills. When I was very young and through most of my early life, people thought I was mute because I didn't really talk. And I was always very quiet. And so in this line of work, especially, a male dominated field, when sometimes you're giving negative adverse findings and people don't want to hear what you have to say, um, being able to masterfully convey the message and project confidence um, has been one of the harder things that I've had to fine tune over the years. I will say I'm much better at it. It's always going to be something that I'm nervous at for meetings. My heart still beats pretty fast, but I think the thing that helped me process it is number one, having your facts straight. If you know your conclusions, if you're confident with what you're saying, then you will much have an easier time presenting those findings at meetings. So knowing your stuff. And the second piece being that knowing that everybody goes through it. And so it is just a practice. It's one of those things like ripping the band-aid off, and then after a while, you just kind of get numb to it. It's like waxing. Eventually, you don't feel it as much, right? Still stings a little, um, but that is something that I can reflect and um, say that that's where I've gotten the most growth in, and people have observed that change. Uh, so that naturally reflects as like, oh, you're so much more confident now. Um, when you are comfortable that you understand your what you do and you're confident in your analytical skills and you can kind of step back and be calm about your decision making processes, it's much more easier to be confident. So I think it just comes with time. But that's been the biggest change for me.
Ooh, no one likes being the bearer of bad news. So I totally understand. I think public speaking in general is really hard for the majority of people. And especially if you're having to tell people something that they don't necessarily want to hear or it's not the best news. Yeah, I totally understand. And that's something that I didn't even think about being in the finance space because it's just like, oh, finance, you're just like working with numbers, you're just doing calculations. But that's interesting that you share, like, oh, sometimes you're the one that's presenting all of the facts. And I think that's great advice for anybody in any field, like knowing your stuff and just delivering it. And like you said, you get used to it the more that you do it. And yeah, I think, yeah, thank you for sharing. That's something that I didn't even think about would be like a challenge or a thing. Um, but I'd love for you to share. I know you said at the beginning that you weren't necessarily a role model, but I think you are a role model. I mean, talking about all of the things that you do, the passion that you have for your career, the the fact that you seek to be part of the community and pour into the community like that. is a role model. And I think that we all have value to share, whether it is like to the younger generation or just to our peers. Like, just being who we are is does make an impact, and we do have um that, I don't know, that skill, that I don't know if it's a skill, but just that energy to be able to pour into someone else, even if you don't know it. And so I love to ask what advice or encouragement you would have for the next generation or even our generation that's going through all of this right now.
Within my family, especially my younger siblings, they see me as a person that usually has it all figured out, and sometimes through sheer will, I've achieved my goals. And I had a cousin ask me recently, it's like, how do you do it? And even I was actually, and I've been asked this question multiple times from my cousin to my younger brother, because I've told this like advice like multiple times now. But I said is that for some people, it's faith. And for some of them, it's religious faith, right? For me, um, I had a very strong faith that there was a light at the end of the tunnel. That, I may be struggling right now, but take a deep breath. Things will work in my favor. Maybe not today, maybe not tomorrow, but they will eventually. That's not to mean that it's just like, okay, let it happen. It's like you have to actively seek to achieve your goals. And there would be times where it had significant setbacks. I mean, significant setbacks, and where it was very hard to kind of see that light. But after I processed myself emotionally, I took a step back, I took a deep breath, and I said, you know what? This is my goal. I'm going to achieve it. Different people have different ways of um, navigating life, right? For me, what's helping me now is the similar kind of concept is that I have a specific goal in mind and I'm going to achieve it. One way or another, it's going to happen. And so breaking my goal down in tiny little pieces and what I can control. Like in this moment, maybe it's just feeding myself so that I can feel better tomorrow or getting a decent night's sleep so that tomorrow I feel better equipped to take on the next day. So even just breaking it down little by little has been incredibly helpful for me in the worst of times. And even now, I mean, sometimes even it's even brushing my teeth in the morning or even just like having a decent meal. But that's what I have found that helps me. Faith in a very basic sense of the word, if that makes sense.
I love that, and I agree totally. I think, yeah, it's just that one small step, as long as like you keep like moving forward. Um yeah, thank you for sharing. That is great advice. And I'm sure that everyone that you've shared that with in your family has appreciated that as well. Even if, like, sometimes you hear advice and you're just like, oh, I don't want, this is not the advice that I wanted, or like, I don't want to hear that. But eventually, like, the more that you hear it, the more you hear it from other people, like, it starts to make sense, it starts to click, and then you're like, okay, this is this is the best advice that I could take right now.
Yeah, I mean, I think my family also tells me a little bit that I don't sugarcoat anything. They say I'm negative. I say I'm realistic. But when I give advice, I mean, tell them, yeah, things aren't going to be always great all the time. There's going to be things outside of your control. There's going to be things that are unfair. But you have to be self-aware, and whatever you have within your ability to control, do that. And I think some of the advice, I struggle a hard time, or I have a hard time with um, some advice in terms of like, oh, I'll say this because I don't want to ruffle any feathers, right? I think that advice should be tailored to the person. There are some people that it's like never be comfortable. Maybe comfort is your goal, and that's okay. Not everybody wants to be a millionaire. Not everybody wants to do different. It's not fair for you to judge your own life for somebody else's standards. Like I told my younger brother, if you don't want to go to college, if you want to be a mechanic, that is a completely perfectly honorable career choice. And you could be a great freaking mechanic. Now, are there unique challenges to being one? And there is going to a 4-year degree? Of course. But you shouldn't let people judge you if this is truly what you want to do. Likewise, if you want to be an artist, you know? Not everybody wants to have like luxury cars or XYZ. Like from my perspective, my goal is not to be drowning in wealth because to be honest, I play Sims all day. It's not like I really need a lot of money for things, right? So that is my perspective from an advice standpoint. Be self-aware, be confident in yourself and what you have to offer, and live your truth.
That is the mic drop that we need to end this episode. Like, let's send people off with that advice. I love it. Where can people connect with you, find you, hang out with you, share all the places that people can connect with you?
So I have a LinkedIn profile, and that is the only social media that I have at this point. I took a step back because of all those things that are going on. I still use Reddit, but to be honest, I think I can be reached out on LinkedIn if you want to connect. And I will obviously be participating in, events organized by yourself or my sister. Anywhere that you'll see that, you'll find me, especially anything having to do with Hispanic and Latina culture. I sometimes participate whenever I can find a spot in the Latina Sweat Project, the yoga events that they do. Um, Economic Awareness Council, obviously, and I'll be working on other social media to connect with your and my sister's guidance, of course.
Yeah, no problem. I think a lot of people in the corporate space, even I as a creative, am on LinkedIn, and that is a really good way to connect with people. So yeah, it's totally okay to be limited on social media, especially since like you could get so lost and like spend too much time on social media. So yeah. Well, thank you so much. I hope that people really like connect with you and find inspiration and hope in our conversation. But I know that we will see each other again soon because like you said, we're always like trying to bring people together through networking and just like hangouts in general, and your sister is really good at doing that. So yeah, thank you for your time. Thank you for coming on, and I really appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you for building this community. I really appreciate it.
All right, thank you, and we will see each other soon. Bye. Okay, thank you so much for listening. Please rate and review this podcast so we can get more ears listening to these stories and can continue elevating La Cultura. You can also comment on our YouTube video if you're watching online. I always like to hear from people and how they resonate with the stories that I share. So feel free to take a screenshot of this episode and share it on Instagram and tag @Elevating La Cultura. Enjoy the rest of your day, afternoon, evening, whenever you're listening, y nos vemos next week. Bye.